Sometimes the wrong number is exactly the right call. At 2:14 a.m. on a freezing October night, Jenny Hunter's world ended. She found herself barefoot on the cold hardwood floor of her Ohio apartment, knees pulled to her chest, long brown hair falling like a curtain around her tear-stained face. The front door hung open behind her. Mario hadn't even bothered to close it when he took Lily. The empty crib mocked her from across the room. Her baby's red dress, the one Jenny had saved 2 weeks of tips to buy, was gone. 11 months old. Blonde curls. A laugh that sounded like sunshine. Gone. Jenny had called 911. She had begged the dispatcher with a voice raw from screaming. She had explained that Mario Whitehead had violated his restraining order for the 3rd time, that he was unstable, that her daughter was in danger. And the system, the same system that had promised to protect her, told her someone would come by in the morning to take a statement. Morning. As if her baby had until morning. So Jenny did the only thing she had left. She grabbed her phone with trembling hands and texted her lawyer, Alton Martinez, the man who'd helped her file the restraining order, the man who'd told her to call if she ever needed help. He took my baby. Mario broke in. She's gone. Please help me. I don't know what to do. She hit send and collapsed back against the wall, staring at nothing, feeling everything inside her shatter into pieces too small to ever put back together. What Jenny didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that 6 months ago after a routine court hearing, she had saved the wrong number in her contacts. 1 digit off. A simple, stupid mistake. But at 2:24 a.m., when her desperate message landed in the wrong inbox, it reached a man who had spent 20 years making sure no child would ever suffer the way his little sister had. If this story makes your heart race, show us some love with a like and share it with someone who believes in second chances and unexpected heroes. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that remind us hope can come from the darkest places. This is the story of a mother's love, a monster's redemption, and the night a single text message changed 2 lives forever. 300 miles away in Chicago, Alton Martinez stood in his penthouse office, the city lights casting shadows across his face. At 47, he looked like what he was, a man carved from granite and regret. Silver threaded through his dark hair. His beard was trimmed with military precision. His suit cost more than most people made in a month. Everything about him said power. Everything about him said danger. But when his phone lit up with a message from an unknown number, and he read 4 words, "He took my baby," something ancient and furious cracked open inside his chest. He read it again. Then a 3rd time. Alton Martinez had built an empire in the shadows. He'd made men disappear for crossing him. His name was whispered in the same breath as warnings and prayers. The FBI had a file on him thick enough to stop a bullet. But there was one rule Alton Martinez had never broken. One line he'd drawn in blood and grief the day he buried his 8-year-old sister 20 years ago. No children. Ever. He opened his encrypted system, ran the number, and within 90 seconds had a complete file. Jenny Hunter, 29, single mother, waitress at the Morning Star Diner in rural Ohio. 3 restraining orders against Mario Whitehead. No family. No money. No one. Exactly the kind of woman the world forgot about. Exactly the kind of woman who needed someone to remember. His fingers moved across the screen, typing a response that would bind their fates together. Stay calm. I'm on my way. He didn't explain who he was. He didn't ask questions. He simply made 2 phone calls that mobilized 15 of his most trusted men, grabbed his coat, and walked into the cold Chicago night. Because Alton Martinez had spent 2 decades building an empire on one unshakable truth. The powerful exist to protect the powerless. And tonight, a desperate mother who thought she was texting her lawyer had accidentally summoned the most dangerous man in the Midwest. The one man who could make her nightmare end. She just had no idea that the monster she'd called would become the answer to a prayer she'd stopped believing anyone would hear. 6 hours later, when Jenny heard the knock at her door at 8:47 a.m., she'd been sitting in the same spot for 6 hours. Numb. Broken. Barely breathing. The police still hadn't arrived. She forced herself to stand on shaking legs and opened the door. And there he stood. A man she'd never seen before. Tall, dark-suited, with silver-streaked hair and eyes that had seen too much. Dangerous. Powerful. Wrong for this moment in every possible way. But in his arms, pointing at her with one tiny finger and wearing her bright red dress. Mama. Lily. The word tore out of Jenny's throat as her daughter reached for her, and she stumbled forward, barely seeing the man who placed her baby into her arms before her knees gave out completely. She sank to the floor right there in the doorway, holding Lily so tight she was afraid she'd break her, sobbing so hard she couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but feel her daughter's heartbeat against her chest. Real. Safe. Home. Alton Martinez stood in the doorway and watched the reunion in silence, his hands still tingling from the weight of the child he'd carried up 3 flights of stairs. Behind him, in the parking lot, 2 black SUVs idled quietly. Inside them, his men waited. Mario Whitehead would never threaten anyone again. That chapter was closed. But this one, this moment, this he hadn't prepared for. Who? Jenny looked up at him, tears streaming down her face, her voice breaking. Who are you? Alton should have left. Should have walked away. Should have disappeared back into the shadows where men like him belonged. Instead, he crouched down so he was eye level with her. This barefoot woman sitting on her apartment floor holding her daughter like the world had just started spinning again. You texted the wrong number, he said quietly. But I'm glad you did. Then he stood, nodded once, and turned to leave. Wait. Jenny's voice stopped him. I don't understand. You're not my lawyer. How did you? What did you? Your daughter is safe, Alton said without turning around. That's all that matters. But who are you? He paused in the doorway, his back still to her, and for just a moment, he let himself be honest. Someone who knows what it's like to be too late. Then Alton Martinez walked down the stairs and disappeared into the gray morning, leaving Jenny Hunter sitting on her apartment floor with her baby in her arms and 1,000 questions she wasn't sure she wanted answered. Behind him, watching from her doorway, Jenny held Lily close and whispered the only words that mattered. Thank you. The words followed him down the stairs, chased him to his car, haunted him the entire drive back to Chicago. Because for the first time in 20 years, Alton Martinez had arrived in time. And it changed everything. But to understand why a man like Alton Martinez would drive through the night for a stranger's child, why he'd risk exposure, break his own rules about staying invisible, and walk into a situation that could have ended his empire, you need to know about the little girl he couldn't save. The 8-year-old sister who made him promise, in her last moments, that he would never let another child suffer alone. Her name was Sophia. And this is the story he'd spent 20 years trying to bury. Alton Martinez didn't believe in second chances. In his world, the world of blood debts and power built on fear, you got one shot to prove your loyalty, one mistake before you disappeared, one chance to walk away before you crossed a line you could never uncross. He'd spent 27 years building an empire in the Midwest, starting with nothing but rage and a promise made to a dying child. Now, at 47, he controlled operations in 7 states. Money laundering through legitimate businesses in Chicago. Protection rackets that kept entire neighborhoods safe from rival gangs. Import operations that moved everything from stolen art to information that could topple politicians. The Martinez name meant something in the underworld. It meant you paid your debts on time. It meant you didn't touch civilians. It meant that if Alton Martinez gave you his word, it was worth more than any contract a lawyer could write. But it also meant that if you crossed him, if you stole from him, lied to him, or broke the rules he'd carved into the foundation of his empire, you simply ceased to exist. 15 men in the past decade had learned that lesson too late. Alton ran his empire from a penthouse office in downtown Chicago, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked a city that both feared and needed him. He didn't sleep much. Couldn't really. Not when sleep brought dreams of things he couldn't change and mistakes he could never fix. So when his phone lit up at 2:24 a.m. with a message from an unknown number, he was exactly where he always was. Standing at those windows, watching Chicago sleep, carrying the weight of a kingdom built on violence and an impossible promise. He took my baby. Mario broke in. She's gone. Please help me. I don't know what to do. For sentences that shattered 20 years of carefully maintained distance. Because Alton Martinez had exactly one rule that overrode every other law in his empire. No children. Ever. 20 years earlier. South Chicago's Sophia Martinez had been 8 years old when she died. 8 years old with braids their mother had woven that morning. Wearing a yellow dress that had been 2 sizes too big because it was a hand-me-down from a cousin they barely knew. She'd been walking home from school, 3 blocks, that's all, just 3 blocks in broad daylight, when 2 rival gang members had opened fire on each other in the street. Wrong place. Wrong time. Wrong world for a little girl who'd spent that morning practicing her spelling words and asking Alton if he'd help her with math homework after dinner. He'd been 27. Already deep enough in the life that he knew how to move weight, collect debts, and make problems disappear. But not deep enough to have the power to protect his own family. Not connected enough to make sure his neighborhood was safe. Not strong enough to save the one person who mattered. Sophia had died holding his hand in the back of an ambulance, her yellow dress turning red, asking him why it hurt so much and if he'd still help her with math homework tomorrow. "Promise me something, Tonio," she'd whispered, using the nickname only she was allowed to call him. Her voice had been so small, like it was already leaving. "Promise me you'll help the other kids. The ones with nobody. Promise." "I promise, Sophia. I promise." She'd smiled, squeezed his hand one last time, and then she was gone. Alton Martinez had made 2 decisions in that ambulance. First, he would become powerful enough that nothing in his territory would ever happen without his permission. Second, no child would ever be collateral damage in his world. Not one. Ever. He'd kept both promises. But until tonight, he'd never been given the chance to keep the third one. The unspoken promise that maybe, somehow, he could save someone else's Sophia before it was too late. Present day. 2:26 a.m. Alton's hands moved with practiced efficiency across his encrypted tablet. Within 60 seconds, he had everything. Jenny Hunter's address, work history, financial records, court documents, and a complete profile on Mario Whitehead that made his jaw tighten with cold fury. Mario Whitehead. 32 years old. Unemployed. Arrests for possession, domestic disturbance, violation of protective orders. And this was the part that made Alton's blood run ice cold. $47,000 in gambling debts to the Volkov syndicate. Alton knew the Volkovs. Russian outfit operating out of Cleveland. They specialized in human trafficking, loan sharking, and collections that left people in pieces. He pulled up Mario's recent phone records. It took exactly 90 seconds to crack into the cloud backup, and there it was. 3 calls tonight to a burner number registered to a known Volkov associate named Dmitry Sokolov. Alton's mind assembled the pieces with the cold precision of a man who'd spent 2 decades reading the worst of humanity. Mario Whitehead hadn't taken his daughter out of spite or revenge. He'd taken her to sell. To erase his debt. To trade an 11-month-old child to traffickers like she was currency. For exactly 4 seconds, Alton Martinez felt something close to the rage that had consumed him the day Sophia died. The kind of rage that made men do things they could never take back. Then he locked it down. Controlled it. Weaponized it. Because rage without discipline was just noise. And Alton Martinez didn't make noise. He made people disappear. He pressed a button on his desk phone. It rang once. "Sir." The voice on the other end belonged to Marcus Webb, his head of security and the closest thing Alton had to a friend. "I need 15 men. Full tactical. Armed but quiet. We're going to Ohio." A pause. Marcus had worked for Alton for 12 years. He knew better than to ask questions. Target. Mario Whitehead. White male, 32, last known address in Youngstown. He's got a baby that doesn't belong to him and he's trying to sell her to the Volkovs. Jesus. Marcus's voice dropped an octave. "You want him alive?" Alton stared at Jenny's message on his screen. Thought about Sophia's yellow dress. Thought about the promise he'd made in that ambulance. Thought about all the children he'd protected by making sure men like Mario Whitehead learned what happened when you crossed the only line that mattered. "No," he said quietly. "I want him to understand what he's done. And then I want him gone." Understood. 20 minutes. Alton hung up and opened a secure line to his tech specialist. I need real-time tracking on 3 phone numbers and facial recognition alerts on all traffic cameras within 50 miles of Youngstown, Ohio. Subject is Mario Whitehead, traveling with an 11-month-old infant. I want to know where he is, where he's going, and who he's meeting. You'll have it in 10 minutes. The pieces were moving now. The machine Alton had built over 20 years, the network of loyal men, the technology that could find anyone, the reputation that made even hardened criminals think twice, all of it activating for one purpose: to save a child who had no idea she needed saving. To keep the promise he'd made to his sister. To prove that maybe, just maybe, the monster he'd become could still do something that mattered. 20 minutes later, his phone chimed. Mario Whitehead's location: an abandoned farmhouse 30 miles outside Youngstown. Security camera footage showed him arriving 40 minutes ago. Thermal imaging confirmed 2 adult heat signatures and 1 small one. The Volkov's buyer was scheduled to arrive in 4 hours. Alton stood, grabbed his coat, Italian wool, black as the Chicago night, and walked toward the elevator. In the garage below, 15 men in tactical gear waited beside 4 black SUVs, engines already running. Marcus met him at the first vehicle. Intel says Whitehead's alone except for the kid. Rural location. No witnesses. Good. Alton opened the passenger door, then paused. Looked at Marcus. I want him to see me coming. I want him to know exactly who found him and why. Marcus nodded slowly. After 12 years, he understood. This wasn't business. This was personal. And the child? Marcus asked. The child goes home to her mother. Unharmed. Unafraid. She doesn't remember any of this. And Whitehead. Alton's expression didn't change. But something in his eyes, something ancient and unforgiving, made Marcus take an unconscious step back. He doesn't get to forget anything. Alton slid into the passenger seat. Behind him, 15 men armed with everything from handguns to tactical rifles climbed into formation. The convoy rolled out of the underground garage in perfect synchronization, disappearing into the Chicago night like shadows with purpose. 300 miles away, Mario Whitehead had exactly 4 hours left to live. He just didn't know it yet. Mario Whitehead's hands wouldn't stop shaking. He sat in the front room of the abandoned farmhouse, staring at his burner phone, trying to convince himself this was the right choice. The only choice. The walls around him were rotting, the windows boarded up, and the smell of mildew and decay made his stomach turn. But this place was off the grid. No cameras. No neighbors. No one to hear anything they shouldn't. Perfect for the kind of transaction that made his skin crawl even as he dialed the number again. It rang 4 times before Dmitry Sokolov answered. You have merchandise? The Russian's accent was thick, his tone flat. Like they were discussing furniture, not a human being. Yeah. Mario's voice cracked. He cleared his throat, tried again. Yeah, I got her. 11 months old, blonde hair, healthy. Just like I said. You bring her to farmhouse like we discuss? I'm here now. Good. Buyer arrives in 3 hours. You stay. You wait. You get paid. Understand? I understand. The line went dead. Mario set the phone down and rubbed his face with both hands. 3 hours. Just 3 more hours and this nightmare would be over. The Volkovs would have their payment. The debt collectors would stop showing up at his apartment. The men who'd broken his ribs last month would leave him alone. He could start over. Get clean. Maybe even get his life back. All it cost was one night. One choice. One child who, if he was being honest, had never really been his anyway. 12 hours earlier. Mario hadn't planned to take Lily. He'd been high when he broke into Jenny's apartment, riding that familiar wave of paranoia and desperation that had become his constant companion since the Volkovs started calling. He just wanted to see her, to explain that he needed money, that he was in trouble, that maybe she could help. But Jenny wasn't there. Her shift at the diner ran late on Tuesdays. The door had been unlocked, she never remembered to lock it, even with the restraining order. And Lily had been sleeping in her crib, peaceful and perfect, like the world wasn't burning down around her. That's when the idea had crawled into his brain, sick and desperate and impossible to shake. She's worth something. To someone. Somewhere. Mario had made the call before he could change his mind. Before he could think about what he was doing. Before the last decent part of him could scream loud enough to stop. Dmitri had answered on the first ring like he'd been waiting. "I have merchandise," Mario had whispered, standing in Jenny's apartment, staring at his sleeping daughter. High quality. Very young. American. Blonde. A pause. Then, how young? 11 months. Another pause, longer this time. Then Dmitri had named a figure that would erase Mario's debt completely and leave him with enough to disappear. $47,000. The exact amount he owed. Like the universe was giving him permission. So he'd picked Lily up, she'd barely stirred, just nuzzled against his chest the way babies do, and walked out into the October cold. He'd driven 3 hours to this farmhouse, this place Dmitri had described down to the broken mailbox and the overgrown driveway. And now he waited. Present. The farmhouse. From the back room, Lily started crying again. She'd been crying on and off for the past hour. Not the screaming kind of crying. Just the sad, confused whimpering of a child who didn't understand why everything felt wrong. Why she wasn't home. Why her mother wasn't there. Mario squeezed his eyes shut and tried to block it out. She'll be better off, he told himself. Jenny can barely afford that apartment. Can barely keep food in the fridge. Can barely survive. Whoever buys Lily, rich people probably. People with money and resources and nannies. She'll have everything Jenny could never give her. It was a lie, and some small part of Mario knew it. But lies were easier than truth when the truth meant acknowledging you were selling your own daughter to human traffickers. The burner phone buzzed. A text from Dmitri. Buyer running early. 1 hour. Be ready. Mario's stomach dropped. 1 hour. 60 minutes until men showed up to take Lily away forever. 60 minutes until he handed over his daughter like she was a transaction, a debt payment, a problem solved. He stood on shaking legs and walked to the back room. Lily sat in the corner on a dirty blanket, her red dress, the one Jenny had bought her, the one she'd been wearing when he took her, wrinkled and stained with tears. Her blonde curls were messy. Her face was blotchy from crying. She looked up when Mario entered, and for just a second she smiled. "Dada," she said, reaching for him. Something inside Mario's chest cracked. This was his daughter. His flesh and blood. The only good thing he'd ever made in his entire wasted life. And he was selling her to monsters because he'd been too weak, too stupid, too strung out to say no to one more bet, one more fix, one more promise that this time would be different. "I'm sorry," he whispered, but he didn't move toward her. Didn't pick her up. Because if he held her, if he let himself feel what a father was supposed to feel, he might not be able to go through with this. And he had to go through with it. The Volkovs didn't accept cancellations. They didn't offer payment plans. You delivered what you promised, or you became the message they sent to everyone else who thought about backing out. Lily's smile faded when he didn't come closer. She started crying again, softer now, like she was giving up. "You'll be okay," Mario said, his voice breaking. "Whoever buys you, they'll take care of you. Better than I ever could. Better than Jenny can. You'll have a real life. A good life. More lies." They tasted like ash. Mario turned and walked back to the front room, closing the door behind him. He couldn't look at her anymore. Couldn't listen to her cry. Couldn't face what he was doing and still pretend he was anything other than exactly what everyone had always said he was. Worthless. Weak. Beyond saving. He picked up the burner phone and checked the time. 4:37 a.m. Less than an hour now. The farmhouse settled around him, wood creaking in the cold. Outside, wind rustled through overgrown weeds. No sounds of traffic. No sounds of civilization. Just emptiness and the weight of a choice that would haunt him until the day he died. If you even get to live with it, a voice whispered in the back of his mind. If the Volkovs don't kill you anyway once they have what they want. If Jenny doesn't find out and come after you herself. If you don't wake up one morning and realize you can't live with what you've done. Mario pushed the thoughts away and focused on the only thing that mattered. In 1 hour, his debts would be paid. In 1 hour, he'd be free. Even if freedom cost everything he had left of his soul. The burner phone buzzed again. 15 minutes out. Mario stood and walked to the window, peering through a gap in the boards. The driveway was empty. The road beyond it dark. Nothing moving except shadows and his own reflection in the dirty glass. Gaunt, hollow-eyed, barely recognizable as the man he'd been 3 years ago before the pills, before the gambling, before everything fell apart. He wondered if Lily would remember him when she was older. Wondered if whoever bought her would tell her she'd been loved once, even by a father who was too broken to keep her. Probably not. Probably better that way. From the back room, Lily had stopped crying. The silence was somehow worse than the tears. Mario checked his phone again. 5:13 a.m. Any minute now. Then, in the distance, so faint he almost missed it, the sound of an engine. He pressed his face against the gap in the boards and saw them. Headlights. Coming up the long driveway. Moving slowly, deliberately, like they knew exactly where they were going. The Volkov's buyer. Right on time. Mario's hands started shaking again. Worse than before. This was it. The point of no return. In 5 minutes, maybe 10, men would walk through that door and take his daughter and hand him an envelope full of cash, and he would walk away and never see her again. It's the right choice, he told himself one more time. It's the only choice. But as the headlights grew brighter, cutting through the pre-dawn darkness like the eyes of something ancient and predatory, Mario Whitehead felt the first cold finger of real fear touch the base of his spine. Because those weren't just any headlights. There were too many of them. And they were moving like a convoy. Like an army. Like something far worse than the Volkov's buyer. The vehicles came to a stop outside the farmhouse. 4 of them, black SUVs with tinted windows, arranged in a formation that blocked any escape route. Engines cut off. Silence fell like a hammer. Mario backed away from the window, his heart hammering in his chest. This wasn't right. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. Dmitri said 1 buyer. 1 transaction. Quiet and quick and done. This was something else entirely. The burner phone in his hand buzzed one final time. Unknown number. Mario Whitehead. Come outside. Slowly. Leave the child inside. Mario stared at the message. His blood running ice cold. Unknown number. Not Dmitri. Not the Volkovs. Someone else. Someone who knew his name. Someone who'd found him. Outside, car doors opened in perfect synchronization. Footsteps on gravel. And then, through the gaps in the boarded windows, Mario saw them. Men in tactical gear. Armed. Professional. Moving with military precision. And at the center of them all, walking toward the farmhouse like he owned the night itself, was a man in an expensive black coat with silver-threaded hair and eyes that promised exactly one thing. Whatever happened next, Mario Whitehead would not walk away from it. The door to the farmhouse didn't break when Alton's men breached it. It simply opened, lock picked in under 10 seconds by Marcus Webb, who moved like a ghost through the darkness. No explosion. No dramatic entry. Just the quiet, professional efficiency of men who'd done this 100 times before. Alton didn't need drama. He needed results. He stepped through the doorway last, his expensive shoes barely making a sound on the rotting floorboards. Around him, 15 men in tactical gear fanned out through the farmhouse with weapons raised and flashlight beams cutting through the darkness like surgical instruments. They cleared the first floor in 90 seconds. Back room, Marcus said quietly, his voice coming through Alton's earpiece. 1 adult male. 1 infant. No weapons visible. Alton nodded and moved toward the hallway, his coat brushing against the peeling wallpaper. He could hear it now, the soft, exhausted whimpering of a child who'd cried herself nearly silent. The sound made something ancient and furious tighten in his chest. Sophia had sounded like that at the end. Small. Scared. Fading. He pushed the memory down and focused on the present. The backroom door was closed. Through it, Alton could hear Mario Whitehead's panicked breathing, the shuffle of feet, the desperate whisper of a man trying to decide between fight and flight when both options had already been taken from him. Alton stopped in front of the door and knocked. Twice. Calm and deliberate. The breathing on the other side hitched. "Mario Whitehead," Alton said, his voice conversational, like they were neighbors meeting on a Sunday morning. "Open the door. We need to talk." Silence. Then, "Who are you?" Mario's voice cracked. "The Volkovs sent you. I have the merchandise. I have what they want. I'm not with the Volkovs." Alton checked his watch. 5:47 a.m. The sun would be up soon. He preferred to be finished before daylight. "Open the door, Mario, or my men will open it for you. Your choice." Another pause. Then the sound of a lock clicking. The door opened 6 inches. Mario's face appeared in the gap. Pale, sweating, eyes red-rimmed and wild. He looked like exactly what he was, a desperate man at the end of a very short rope. "I don't know who you are," Mario said, his voice shaking. "But this doesn't concern you. This is business between me and the Volkovs. Private business." Alton smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "You're right," he said. "It was private business. Until you involved someone who texted me for help at 2 a.m, crying that her baby was stolen." He watched the color drain from Mario's face as understanding dawned. You're the lawyer?" Mario whispered. "Jenny's lawyer." "No." Alton pushed the door open, not roughly, just with enough steady pressure that Mario stumbled backward. "I'm not her lawyer. I'm the man she accidentally texted instead." Alton stepped into the room, and behind him, Marcus and 3 others followed, their weapons trained on Mario with professional precision. The space was small, maybe 10 by 12 feet, with rotting walls, a single broken chair, and in the corner on a dirty blanket, a little girl in a red dress. Lily. She looked up when they entered, her blonde curls matted with tears, her face streaked with dirt. When she saw all the big men with guns and angry faces, she started crying again. Not the exhausted whimper from before, but real terrified sobs. "Sure, sweetheart," Alton said softly, but he didn't move toward her yet. First, he had business to finish. He turned his attention back to Mario, who had backed himself into the corner opposite Lily. His hands raised like he thought surrender might save him. "Please," Mario said, and there were actual tears running down his face now. "Please, I didn't have a choice. The Volkovs, they were going to kill me. I owe them $47,000. They broke my ribs. They said next time they'd. So you decided to sell your daughter." It wasn't a question. Mario flinched like he'd been struck. "She'll be better off. Whoever buys her. They have money. Resources. Jenny can barely keep a roof over her head. The kid deserves better than." "Don't." Alton's voice dropped to something cold and final. "Don't insult both of us by pretending this was about her welfare. You were saving yourself. You were trading a child's life for your own comfort." "I didn't know what else to do." Mario's voice rose to something close to hysteria. "You don't understand. The Volkovs don't negotiate. They don't accept payment plans. You deliver or you die. That's the rule." Alton studied him for a long moment. Saw the track marks on his arms. The tremor in his hands that had nothing to do with fear. The hollow eyes of a man who'd been circling the drain for years and had finally found the bottom. "You're right," Alton said quietly. "I do understand. I understand that you made a choice. Several choices, actually. The choice to gamble money you didn't have. The choice to take drugs you couldn't pay for. The choice to ignore every warning and restraining order and consequence until your addiction became someone else's problem." He took a step closer. Mario pressed himself harder against the wall. "And tonight, you made one final choice. To erase your debt by selling an 11-month-old child to human traffickers. Your own daughter. What are you going to do?" Mario whispered. "Call the cops? Go ahead. At least in prison I'm alive. At least the Volkovs can't." "I'm not calling the police," Alton said. Understanding hit Mario's face like a physical blow. His legs gave out and he slid down the wall, shaking his head frantically. No. No, please. I'll give her back. I'll disappear. I'll never contact Jenny again. You're right about one thing, Alton interrupted. You'll never contact Jenny again. He nodded to Marcus, who stepped forward with 2 other men. Mario started screaming. Incoherent pleas and promises and desperate bargains that meant nothing because men like Mario Whitehead didn't get second chances in Alton Martinez's world. They pulled Mario to his feet and dragged him toward the door. His screams echoed through the farmhouse, then cut off abruptly as they took him outside. Alton didn't watch. He'd seen this part too many times to need to witness it again. Instead, he turned to where Lily sat on her dirty blanket, sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. He crouched down slowly, making himself small and unthreatening, took off his coat and set it aside. Behind him, the remaining men stepped back, lowering their weapons, giving space. "Hey, sweetheart," Alton said softly. "It's okay. You're safe now." Lily looked at him with red-rimmed eyes, tears streaming down her face. She was terrified. Of the strange men, the guns, the shouting, everything that had happened in the past few hours that her baby brain couldn't possibly understand. But when Alton held out his hands, something in his voice or his eyes must have felt safe, because she lifted her arms toward him. The universal gesture of every child who needed to be held. Alton picked her up carefully, supporting her head the way he'd learned 20 years ago with Sophia. Lily was heavier than he expected. Solid and real and alive. She buried her face in his shoulder and cried, her small body shaking with exhaustion and fear. "I've got you," Alton murmured, standing slowly. "Your mama's waiting for you. We're going to take you home." Outside, in the pre-dawn darkness, there was a single gunshot. Then silence. Marcus appeared in the doorway a moment later, his expression neutral. "It's done." Alton nodded. Mario Whitehead would be found eventually, weeks or months from now, in a place the Volkovs would take credit for. Just another addict who'd crossed the wrong people. Just another statistic in a city that ground up desperate men and spit them out like garbage. No connection to Alton Martinez. No connection to Jenny Hunter. No loose ends. Just justice, delivered in the only language men like Mario understood. "Clean this up," Alton said quietly. "Make it look like the Volkovs finished what they started. I want no trace of us here." "Understood." Alton carried Lily out of the farmhouse and into the gray morning light. Behind him, his men moved with practiced efficiency, erasing evidence, staging the scene, turning chaos into something that would tell the right story to whoever found it. He walked to the first SUV and climbed into the back seat, still holding Lily against his chest. She'd stopped crying now, exhaustion finally winning over fear. Her small hand clutched his shirt. Her breathing had evened out into something close to sleep. Marcus slid into the driver's seat. "Where to?" Alton looked down at the child in his arms. Thought about Sophia. Thought about the promise he'd made 20 years ago. Thought about how, for the first time in 2 decades, he'd arrived in time to save someone. "Jenny Hunter's address," he said. 300 miles. Drive fast. As the convoy pulled away from the farmhouse, leaving Mario Whitehead's fate to the cold October dawn, Alton held Lily a little closer and made a silent promise to a girl who would never remember this night. "You're going home. You're safe. And no one will ever hurt you again." The sun broke over the horizon as they hit the highway, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Lily slept in his arms, peaceful now, unaware that the monster holding her had just killed her father to keep her safe. Unaware that sometimes, monsters were the only thing standing between innocence and a world that would destroy it. 300 miles to go. 300 miles until he could keep his promise to Sophia one more time. Alton closed his eyes and let the rhythm of the road carry them home. Jenny Hunter hadn't moved from the floor in 6 hours. She sat with her back against the wall, knees pulled to her chest, staring at the empty crib across the room like if she looked away for even a second, she might miss something. Might miss a sign. Might miss the moment her daughter came back. If her daughter came back. The police still hadn't arrived. She'd called 3 more times, each call more desperate than the last, And each time they told her the same thing, an officer would be by in the morning to take a statement. As if morning meant anything when your baby was gone. As if a statement could bring her back. The sun was starting to rise now. Gray dawn light filtered through the thin curtains, painting everything in shades of ash and despair. Jenny watched it and felt nothing. No hope. No fear. Just the vast empty nothing of a mother whose child had been stolen and who had run out of prayers, tears, and reasons to believe. Her phone sat next to her, screen dark. The lawyer, Alton Martinez, hadn't responded after that first message. Stay calm. I'm on my way. 6 hours ago. 6 hours of silence. Maybe he'd realized it was the wrong number. Maybe he'd gone back to sleep. Maybe he'd never been coming at all and she'd just been desperate enough to believe a stranger's text message meant salvation. Jenny pressed her forehead against her knees and tried to remember how to breathe. Lily's blonde curls. Her laugh. The way she said, "Mama," every morning. The weight of her in my arms. The smell of her baby shampoo. The trust in her eyes when she looked up at me. If she held on to those memories hard enough, maybe they wouldn't fade. Maybe when they found Lily's body, because that's what happened to babies stolen by desperate, unstable men, at least Jenny would remember what it felt like to be her mother. A sound pulled her from the spiral. Footsteps. In the hallway outside her apartment. Heavy. Deliberate. Moving toward her door. Jenny's head snapped up. Her heart suddenly hammering. The police. Mario coming back. Someone with news she didn't want to hear? The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then knock, knock, knock. 3 deliberate raps on her door. Jenny tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't hold her. 6 hours on the floor had left her stiff and numb. She crawled forward instead, using the wall to pull herself upright, her bare feet stumbling over themselves as she lurched toward the door. Who is it? Her voice came out as a broken whisper. No answer. Just another knock. Patient. Waiting. Jenny's hand shook as she reached for the doorknob. Some distant part of her brain screamed that she should check the peephole, should ask for identification, should be careful because it was barely dawn and she was alone and vulnerable. But the larger part, the mother part, the desperate part, the part that had nothing left to lose, just needed to know. She opened the door. And her entire world stopped. Standing in the hallway was a man she'd never seen before. Tall. Dark-suited despite the early hour. Silver threaded through his hair. Eyes that had seen too much. Expensive coat. Dangerous presence. But none of that mattered. Because in his arms, looking rumpled and exhausted and perfect and alive. Lily. The word tore out of Jenny's throat like something physical. Like her soul trying to escape her body. Like every prayer she'd stopped believing in suddenly answered all at once. Her daughter turned her head at the sound of her voice. Their eyes met. And Lily's face crumpled as she reached out with both arms. Mama. Jenny didn't remember moving. Didn't remember crossing the threshold or closing the distance or taking Lily from the stranger's arms. She just suddenly had her daughter, solid and real and warm against her chest, and the world tilted sideways. Her knees gave out. She went down hard right there in the doorway, clutching Lily so tight she was afraid she might hurt her but unable to loosen her grip even slightly. Tears she didn't know she still had left poured down her face. Sobs ripped through her chest so violently she couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but hold her baby and shake and break apart from pure relief. Mama, Lily whimpered, burying her face in Jenny's neck. Mama, Mama, Mama. I've got you, Jenny gasped between sobs. I've got you. You're safe. You're home. Oh God, baby, I've got you. She rocked back and forth on the floor, her whole body trembling, checking Lily frantically with shaking hands. No injuries. No blood. Just dirt and tears and exhaustion. Alive. Unharmed. Here. She's here. She's real. She's safe. The thoughts circled through Jenny's mind on repeat, the only coherent thing she could process through the overwhelming flood of emotion. Everything else was just sensation. The weight of her daughter in her arms, the sound of her breathing, the feeling of her small hand clutching Jenny's shirt. Real. Not a dream. Not a nightmare ending. Real. Minutes passed. Or hours. Jenny had no concept of time anymore. She just held Lily and cried and whispered broken thank yous to a god she'd stopped believing in sometime around 3 a.m. Finally, eventually, the sobs subsided enough for her to breathe. The world came back into focus. And Jenny remembered. Someone had brought Lily back. She looked up, still on the floor, still holding her daughter like a lifeline. The stranger stood in her doorway, his expression unreadable. He hadn't moved. Hadn't spoken. Just watched her reunion with the quiet patience of someone who understood this moment was sacred. Who? Jenny's voice broke. She tried again. Who are you? The man was silent for a long moment. Then he crouched down slowly, bringing himself to her level. Up close, she could see the exhaustion in his eyes. The weight he carried. The violence that clung to him like cologne. You texted the wrong number, he said quietly. His voice was rough, like he'd been awake all night. But I'm glad you did. Jenny stared at him, her mind trying to process through the fog of relief and shock. Wrong number? This wasn't Alton Martinez, her lawyer? Then who? I don't understand, she whispered. How did you? Where's Mario? What did you? Mario won't bother you again. The words were final. Absolute. The kind of statement that left no room for questions. He made choices. He paid for them. Something in his tone made Jenny's blood run cold. She held Lily tighter, suddenly aware that she was sitting on her floor with a stranger who'd somehow found her daughter in 6 hours when the police couldn't be bothered to try. A stranger who spoke about Mario in the past tense with the certainty of someone who knew exactly where the bodies were buried. What did you do? She asked, though part of her didn't want to know the answer. What needed to be done? He stood, straightening his coat. Your daughter is safe. That's all that matters. But I don't even know your name. Who are you? Why would you help me? For just a moment, something shifted in his eyes. Something old and painful and carefully buried. He looked at Lily, really looked at her, the way someone might look at a ghost or a memory or a chance at redemption they'd given up on years ago. Someone who knows what it's like to be too late, he said finally. Then he turned to leave. Wait. Jenny struggled to her feet, still holding Lily. I need to thank you. I need to. How can I ever repay? You can't. He paused in the doorway, his back to her. And you don't need to. Just keep her safe. Love her. Be the parent she deserves. I will. I promise. But please, your name. At least tell me your name. He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, Alton Martinez. The name hit her like ice water. Alton Martinez. The same name she'd saved in her phone. The lawyer. Except, you're not a lawyer, she said slowly, pieces clicking into place. Are you? He glanced back at her then, and she saw it clearly now, the danger she'd missed in her desperation. The power. The darkness. The kind of man mothers told their children to run from. The kind of man who could make other men disappear. No, he said. I'm not. Then what are you? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Sad. Knowing. Someone who keeps promises. And then Alton Martinez walked down the hallway and disappeared down the stairs, his expensive shoes barely making a sound on the worn carpet. Jenny stood in her doorway holding Lily, watching the space where he'd been, her mind reeling. A stranger. A wrong number. A man who'd driven 300 miles through the night to save a baby he didn't know because a desperate mother had accidentally texted him for help. A man who'd somehow found Mario and ended whatever threat he posed in 6 hours. A man whose name made her skin prickle with recognition even though she'd never met him before. Alton Martinez. She'd heard that name somewhere. Whispered in the diner. Mentioned on true crime podcasts. Always with the same tone, reverence and fear. Jenny carried Lily back inside and closed the door, her hands shaking as she locked it. Through the window, she watched 4 black SUVs pull away from her building, disappearing into the gray morning like they'd never been there at all. She looked down at her daughter, who had finally stopped crying and was just clinging to her now, exhausted but safe. "You're okay," Jenny whispered, kissing Lily's head. "We're okay." But as she sank onto the couch and held her baby close, Jenny knew that nothing would ever really be okay again. Because now she knew what it felt like to have everything ripped away. She knew what it meant to be truly helpless. And she knew there was a man out there, a dangerous, powerful, terrifying man, who had saved her daughter when no one else would. A man she owed everything to. A man whose real name she'd have to search online to understand. A man who'd looked at Lily with haunted eyes and said he knew what it was like to be too late. Who were you too late for? Jenny wondered. What promise are you keeping? But the questions would have to wait. For now, all that mattered was the weight of her daughter in her arms and the quiet truth that they had survived the worst night of their lives. Thanks to the wrong number. Thanks to a stranger in the darkness. Thanks to a monster who'd proven that sometimes, the devil himself could be an angel if you caught him on the right night. Jenny waited 3 days before she Googled his name. 3 days of holding Lily closer than usual. 3 days of jumping at every sound in the hallway. 3 days of telling herself that it didn't matter who Alton Martinez was or what he'd done to Mario. All that mattered was that her daughter was safe. But on the 3rd night after Lily finally fell asleep in her crib, Jenny had moved it into her own bedroom. She couldn't bear to have her daughter out of sight. She sat on her couch with her laptop and typed 2 words into the search bar. Alton Martinez. The results loaded. And Jenny's blood ran cold. Martinez crime family expands Midwest operations. Chicago Tribune, 2019. FBI investigation into Martinez syndicate stalls amid witness intimidation. Associated Press, 2021. The Ghost of Chicago, Inside the Empire of Alton Martinez. True Crime Weekly Podcast, Episode 47. Alleged crime boss Alton Martinez walks free after charges dropped. NBC Chicago, 2023. The images were even worse. Surveillance photos. Courtroom sketches. A single professional photograph that looked like it had been taken at some charity gala. Alton Martinez in a tuxedo, his expression cold and regal, looking exactly like what he was, a king. A king of the underworld. Jenny's hands shook as she clicked on the first article. Then the second. Then the third. Each one painted the same picture in increasingly horrifying detail. Alton Martinez. Age 47. Suspected head of the Martinez crime family. Operations spanning 7 Midwestern states. Money laundering. Racketeering. Suspected involvement in at least 15 murders, though nothing had ever been proven. A man so dangerous that witnesses refused to testify. A man so powerful that even federal prosecutors couldn't touch him. The devil of Chicago. And she had let him hold her daughter. Jenny slammed the laptop shut and pressed her hands against her mouth, fighting the urge to vomit. She thought about those cold gray eyes. The expensive suit. The way his men had moved with military precision. The absolute certainty in his voice when he said Mario wouldn't bother her again. He made choices. He paid for them. Oh God. Mario was dead. He had to be. Men like Alton Martinez didn't just scare people away or call the police. They solved problems permanently. Efficiently. Finally. And she had thanked him for it. The next morning, Jenny called in sick to work and spent 4 hours listening to that true crime podcast. The host spoke in hushed, reverent tones about the Martinez empire, how Alton had built it from nothing after his sister's death, how he ruled with an iron fist wrapped in expensive leather, how people who crossed him simply disappeared. But there was one detail that made her pause the episode and replay it 3 times. Despite his ruthless reputation, sources claim Martinez has one unbreakable rule. No harm comes to children in his territory. Ever. Some say it's because of his sister Sophia, who was killed in gang crossfire when she was 8 years old. Others say it's just good business. Even criminals draw lines. But everyone agrees, if you hurt a child in Alton Martinez's world, you don't just disappear. You suffer first. Jenny sat with that information for a long time. A monster with a code. A killer who protected children. A devil who'd saved her daughter when the police told her to wait until morning. The cognitive dissonance was making her head spin. 1 week later. The envelope appeared under her door on a Tuesday morning. Jenny found it when she took Lily to daycare. Thick, cream-colored paper with no return address. Inside was a single business card with an embossed phone number and one handwritten line. If you need to talk. A.M. She stared at it for 10 minutes. Threw it in the trash. Retrieved it 5 minutes later. Carried it in her purse for 3 days like a loaded gun. Finally, on Friday night after Lily was asleep, Jenny stepped outside her apartment building and dialed the number. He answered on the second ring. Ms. Hunter. His voice was exactly as she remembered. Calm, controlled, carrying the weight of someone who never had to raise his voice to be heard. I know who you are, Jenny said without preamble. I Googled you. I listened to the podcasts. I read the articles. Silence on the other end. Then, I suspected you would. You're a criminal. A mob boss. The FBI has a file on you. People disappear when they cross you. Yes. The simple acknowledgement threw her off. No denials. No justifications. Just the truth stated plainly. You killed Mario, didn't you? Another pause. Would you like the honest answer, or the answer that lets you sleep at night? The honest one. Yes. I did. Jenny closed her eyes. She'd known, of course she'd known, but hearing him say it out loud made it real in a way she wasn't prepared for. Why? Her voice cracked. Why would you help me? You don't know me. Lily isn't your responsibility. Why would a man like you care about some random waitress's baby? Because 20 years ago I couldn't save my sister. The words came out flat, emotionless, but Jenny heard the weight beneath them. And I promised her, in the back of an ambulance while she died from a bullet meant for someone else, that I would make sure no other child suffered if I had the power to prevent it. So this was about keeping a promise to a dead girl? Isn't that reason enough? Jenny didn't have an answer for that. I need to see you, she said finally. Face to face. I can't process this over the phone. When and where? Tomorrow. Noon. The coffee shop on 5th Street. Public. Daytime. I'll be there. Saturday, 12:07 p.m. Alton Martinez sat in the back corner of the coffee shop, wearing dark jeans and a simple black sweater instead of his usual suit. Trying, Jenny thought, to look less threatening. It didn't work. He still radiated danger like heat from a fire, but she appreciated the effort. She slid into the seat across from him, her heart hammering. Up close, in daylight, he looked tired. Older than his years. Haunted. Thank you for coming, she said. Of course. I need you to understand something. Jenny folded her hands on the table to stop them from shaking. You saved my daughter's life. I will be grateful for that until the day I die. But you're also a monster. You kill people. You run a criminal empire. You're the kind of man I should keep as far away from my daughter as possible. Alton didn't flinch. You're right. So how am I supposed to reconcile that? How am I supposed to feel about someone who is both my daughter's savior and a murderer? You're not, Alton said simply. Both things are true. I am the man who saved Lily. I am also the man who has done terrible things. You don't have to reconcile them, Ms. Hunter. You just have to decide if you can live with the contradiction. Jenny stared at him. Do you feel any guilt? For the people you've hurt? Yes. But you keep doing it anyway. I keep doing what's necessary to maintain order in a world that would be worse without it. He leaned forward slightly. I'm not asking for your forgiveness or your understanding. I'm not a good man. But I am a man who keeps his promises. And I promised my sister I would protect children who couldn't protect themselves. Even if it means becoming a monster. Especially then. His gray eyes held hers. Monsters are the only thing other monsters understand. Jenny thought about Mario. About what he'd planned to do to Lily. About the Volkovs who would have bought her daughter and done things too horrible to imagine. About a system that told her to wait until morning while her baby was stolen. He was going to sell her, she said quietly. Mario. To human traffickers. I didn't know that until I found his phone records. The police told me yesterday. They found his body. They think it was the Volkovs. Alton said nothing. So you didn't just save Lily from her father. You saved her from something much worse. Yes. And you did that by becoming something worse yourself. For the first time, something flickered in Alton's expression. Not quite a smile. Not quite sadness. Something in between. Violence is a language, Ms. Hunter. Sometimes it's the only language that gets through. I wish that wasn't true. But wishing doesn't change reality. They sat in silence for a long moment. Around them, the coffee shop buzzed with normal life. Students studying, couples laughing, ordinary people living ordinary days. Neither of them fit in that picture anymore. I don't know if I can trust you, Jenny said finally. But I don't think I need to be afraid of you either. You should always be a little afraid, Alton said quietly. I am dangerous. That's not going to change. But you and Lily are protected. That won't change either. Why? The debt is paid. You saved her. You kept your promise to your sister. You don't owe us anything. Alton was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. Because for the first time in 20 years, I wasn't too late. And I'd like to make sure I never am again. Jenny felt something shift in her chest. Understanding, maybe. Or recognition. This man, this monster, was broken in the same way she was. Haunted by the same fear. Fighting the same fight in his own terrible way. I'm not asking you to be in our lives, she said carefully. But I'm not going to tell you to stay away either. Does that make sense? Perfect sense. And if I need help again, you call. No matter what. No matter when. Jenny stood to leave, then paused. Your sister. Sophia. What was she like? Alton's expression softened into something almost human. Brave. Kind. She wanted to be a teacher. She helped me with my homework even though she was 5 years younger. He looked out the window. She deserved better than the world gave her. So do you. He looked surprised. Ms. Hunter. Jenny. If we're going to have this weird, impossible understanding, you should call me Jenny. A ghost of a smile. Jenny. She walked to the door, then turned back one more time. Thank you, Alton. For everything. Even the parts I'll never fully understand. You're welcome. As Jenny stepped out into the afternoon sunlight, she realized something. She wasn't afraid anymore. Not of Alton Martinez. Not of the devil with a code. Not of the monster who'd proven that sometimes the darkest souls carried the brightest light. She just hoped she'd never need to call that number again. But she kept the card anyway. Just in case. The first thing Jenny noticed was the lock. 2 weeks after their conversation at the coffee shop, she came home from her shift at the diner to find her apartment door had a new deadbolt. Industrial grade. The kind that cost more than her monthly rent. A note was taped beneath it in precise handwriting. The old one could be picked in under 30 seconds. This one can't. A.M. Jenny stood in the hallway for a long moment, staring at that note. Part of her wanted to be angry. He'd entered her apartment without permission, had someone install hardware without asking. But the larger part, the mother part, just felt safer. She threw the note away. But she used the new lock every night. The second thing was the daycare. Jenny had been on the waiting list at Little Scholars Academy for 8 months. It was the best childcare facility in the area. Clean, safe, with actual educational programs instead of just glorified babysitting. But it cost $800 a month and had a 2-year waiting list. Then one morning she received a call. A spot had opened up. Somehow. And due to a clerical error, their system showed she'd already paid the first 3 months. We're so sorry for the confusion, the director said. But we're excited to welcome Lily. Jenny knew there was no clerical error. She tried calling Alton's number to confront him, to tell him she couldn't accept this, that she didn't need charity. But when she heard his calm voice answer, all she could say was, "Thank you." A pause. Then, "She deserves the best start possible." He hung up before she could argue. The third thing was the car. Jenny had been taking the bus to work for 3 years, ever since her Honda died and she couldn't afford the repairs. But one morning she found a set of keys in her mailbox with a note. 2019 Toyota Camry. Registered in your name. Paid in full. Safe, reliable, good in snow. The bus isn't safe at night. AM. This time, Jenny did call him. And this time she was angry. I can't accept a car from you, she said the moment he answered. This is too much. The lock, the daycare, now this? I'm not a charity case. I know you're not. Then why? Because you work double shifts to feed your daughter. Because you take the bus past midnight through neighborhoods where women get hurt. Because Lily deserves a mother who comes home safely. His voice softened. Let me do this, Jenny. Please. She wanted to refuse. Wanted to maintain some dignity, some independence. But standing in the parking lot looking at that sensible, safe, perfect car, she thought about all the nights she'd waited at bus stops in the cold, checking over her shoulder, clutching her keys like a weapon. Okay, she whispered. But no more. This is the last thing. Okay. It wasn't the last thing. Alton told himself he was just keeping his promise. That's what he said when he arranged for the new lock. When he called in a favor to get Lily into that daycare. When he bought Jenny a car that wouldn't break down and leave her stranded. It was about protection. About keeping them safe. About honoring Sophia's memory. It had nothing to do with the way Jenny's voice sounded when she thanked him. Or how she'd looked at him in that coffee shop. Not with fear, but with something closer to understanding. Or the fact that for the first time in 20 years, he went to bed thinking about something other than blood debts and power plays. He was lying to himself. He knew it. But lies were easier than admitting he was getting attached to a woman and child who deserved so much better than a man like him. 6 weeks after the rescue. It started innocently enough. Alton stopping by to check on them. Just 5 minutes, he told himself. Just to make sure the security measures were working. That they felt safe. But 5 minutes turned into 10. 10 turned into 30. And somehow, those weekly check-ins became a routine. Every Saturday morning at 9 a.m., Alton Martinez would knock on Jenny's door. And every Saturday, she would let him in. At first, they just talked. Small talk mostly. How was work? How was Lily doing at daycare? The weather. Nothing personal. Nothing real. But gradually, the walls came down. Jenny told him about her childhood in foster care. About aging out of the system at 18 with nothing but a high school diploma and a backpack. About meeting Mario when she was young and stupid enough to think love could fix broken people. About how becoming a mother had given her a reason to keep fighting when everything else felt impossible. Alton listened. Really listened. And sometimes, not often but sometimes, he would share pieces of himself too. About Sophia. About his mother who'd worked 3 jobs and still couldn't keep them safe. About the moment he decided that power was the only real protection in this world. Do you ever regret it? Jenny asked one morning. The life you chose. Alton was quiet for a long time. Every day. But regret doesn't change anything. I am what I am. But you could be something else. You're not trapped. Yes, I am. He looked at her with those haunted gray eyes. Men like me don't get redemption arcs, Jenny. We just try to do less damage on the way out. Lily changed everything. The first time Alton held her after that initial rescue, she'd been too exhausted and traumatized to register who he was. But now, 6 weeks later, she recognized him. And for some inexplicable reason, she loved him. Every Saturday when he arrived, Lily would toddle over with her arms up, demanding to be held. And Alton, the man who'd killed 15 people with his own hands, who ran a criminal empire with iron discipline, would melt. He'd sit on Jenny's worn couch with Lily in his lap, reading her board books about hungry caterpillars and runaway bunnies. His deep voice gentle in a way Jenny suspected no one else had ever heard. Lily would play with his watch, an expensive Rolex that probably cost more than Jenny made in a year. She'd tug on his silver-threaded hair. She'd pat his face with her tiny hands and laugh when his beard tickled her palms. And Alton would smile. Not the cold, controlled expression he wore like armor. A real smile. Soft and unguarded and heartbreakingly human. Jenny watched these moments from the kitchen, pretending to wash dishes or make coffee, her chest tight with emotions she didn't know how to name. This was the man the FBI couldn't catch. The ghost of Chicago. The devil who made people disappear. And he was playing peek-a-boo with her daughter like it was the most important thing in the world. 10 weeks after the rescue. "You're different with her," Jenny said one Saturday afternoon. Lily had fallen asleep on Alton's chest, her blonde curls spread across his black sweater. He hadn't moved in 20 minutes, afraid of waking her. Different how? Softer. Human. Jenny sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "She brings something out in you." Alton looked down at the sleeping child. "She reminds me why I made the promise in the first place. Before everything got complicated. Before I became." He trailed off. "A monster." I was going to say, "Too far gone to turn back." "Do you want to turn back?" The question hung in the air between them. Outside, autumn rain pattered against the windows. Inside, the apartment was warm and quiet and felt, for just a moment, like something close to peace. "I don't know if I can," Alton said finally. "I've done things, Jenny. Terrible things. You can't just walk away from that. You can't wash that much blood off your hands." "But if you could." He looked at her then. Really looked at her. And Jenny saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. Longing. Raw and desperate and quickly hidden. "If I could," he said softly, "I would want something like this. Something normal. Something good." Something like what? But he didn't answer. Just looked away, his jaw tight, and Jenny knew he meant this. Her. Lily. Saturday mornings and board books and the kind of quiet domestic happiness that men like him weren't allowed to have. Her heart started racing. Because she felt it too. This impossible thing growing between them. This connection she had no business feeling with a man who lived in shadows and violence. But God help her, when Alton looked at her daughter with such tenderness, when he spoke about wanting to be better, when he sat in her modest apartment like it was sanctuary, she saw past the monster to the man underneath. The broken, haunted man who'd been protecting people his whole life even while destroying himself. "Alton. I should go." He stood carefully, transferring Lily to Jenny's arms. The child stirred but didn't wake. "It's late." It was barely 2 p.m. "You don't have to leave." "Yes, I do." He grabbed his coat, not meeting her eyes. I'm getting too comfortable here. It's not appropriate." "Why not?" "Because you and Lily deserve someone who isn't." He stopped. Shook his head. "I'll see you next week." Alton, wait. But he was already gone, the door closing softly behind him. Jenny stood in her living room holding her sleeping daughter, staring at that closed door, and felt something crack open in her chest. Something terrifying and wonderful and completely impossible. She was falling for him. For the monster. For the devil. For the broken man who read board books and bought car seats and looked at her like she was something precious he had no right to touch. This is a mistake. Her rational mind screamed. He's a criminal. A killer. Everything you should run from. But her heart whispered something different. He's the man who saved your daughter. Who checks on you every week. Who wants to be better even if he doesn't believe he can be. Outside, through the window, Jenny watched Alton's black SUV pull away. Marcus was driving. Alton sat in the back, staring at his phone, his expression unreadable. She wondered if he felt it too, this gravitational pull between them. This impossible thing that grew stronger every Saturday. This connection that violated every rule about who should love whom and why. Probably. And that, Jenny realized, was exactly why he'd left. Because Alton Martinez kept his promises. And he'd promised himself that he would protect them, not destroy them by dragging them further into his world. Even if it cost him the first real peace he'd felt in 20 years. Jenny kissed Lily's forehead and whispered, "What do we do about him, baby girl?" Lily slept on, peaceful and safe, unaware that her mother's heart was breaking for a man who wouldn't let himself be saved. The photograph arrived on a Tuesday. Jenny found it slipped under her apartment door when she came home from dropping Lily at daycare. A single 8 by 10 glossy print, professionally taken with a telephoto lens. It showed her and Lily getting into the Toyota Camry Alton had given her. Clear. High resolution. Recent. She was wearing the jacket she'd bought last week. Written across the bottom in red marker. Martinez's new weakness. Jenny's hands shook as she stared at it. Her first instinct was to call the police. Her second was to grab Lily and run. Her third, the one that terrified her most, was to call Alton. She chose the third. He answered before the first ring finished. Jenny. What's wrong? Someone left a photo under my door. Of me and Lily. They know about you. They called us your weakness. Silence. Then, in a voice so cold it made her shiver. Lock your door. Don't open it for anyone. I'm 10 minutes away. He was there in 7. Alton stood in Jenny's apartment holding the photograph, his expression carved from stone. Behind him, Marcus and 3 other men swept the building, checking for surveillance, for threats, for any sign of who had delivered this message. The Kozlov Bratva, Alton said finally, his voice flat. Russian outfit out of Detroit. We've had territorial disputes for the past 6 months. What do they want? To hurt me. He set the photo down carefully, like it might explode. And they've identified the best way to do it. Jenny felt ice slide down her spine. Us. Yes. So what do we do? Alton looked at her, and she saw something she'd never seen before in those gray eyes. Fear. Not for himself. For her. For Lily. You run, he said quietly. I have a safe house in Montana. New identities. Money. You and Lily disappear. Start over somewhere the Kozlovs will never find you. And you. I handle this. Permanently. Jenny stared at him. You want me to take my daughter and vanish? Leave everything. My job, my life, this apartment. Better than the alternative. His voice was hard now. Controlled. If the Kozlovs decide your leverage, they won't just threaten you, Jenny. They'll take you. And they'll make me watch what they do to you and Lily until I give them what they want. The brutal honesty of it hit her like a physical blow. This wasn't abstract danger. This was real. Men with guns and no morals who would hurt a child to make a point. How long would we have to hide? However long it takes for me to eliminate the threat. Weeks. Months. Maybe years. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Years. Years of living under a false name, looking over her shoulder, raising Lily in isolation from everything familiar. Years of being a ghost because she'd made the mistake of letting a dangerous man into her life. There has to be another way, Jenny said. There isn't. Alton's jaw was tight. This is what happens when people like me get close to people like you. My world destroys everything it touches. I should have known better. I should have stayed away. But you didn't. No. I didn't. He looked away. And now you're paying for my selfishness. Jenny felt something surge in her chest. Not fear, not anger, but clarity. She'd spent 3 months watching this man transform from a nightmare into something complicated and human. She'd seen him with her daughter. Heard the pain in his voice when he spoke about his sister. Witnessed the war between what he was and what he wanted to be. And now he was trying to push her away to keep her safe, even though she could see it was tearing him apart. What if I don't want to run? She said quietly. Alton's head snapped toward her. Jenny. What if I trust you to protect us? Here. Without us disappearing. That's not. You've kept us safe for 3 months. New locks, new security, you check on us every week. If the threat is real, then increase the protection. But don't ask me to give up my entire life. You don't understand what you're asking. Then explain it to me. Alton closed his eyes. When he opened them, the exhaustion there was staggering. If I protect you openly, if I make it clear that you and Lily are under my personal protection, it becomes a political statement. It tells every rival organization that I have a weakness they can exploit. It destabilizes the entire balance of power I've spent 20 years building. And if you don't, then I send you away and make sure the Kozlovs believe you mean nothing to me. Which keeps you safe, but—" He stopped. "But what?" "But means I never see you again." The confession landed between them like something precious and broken. Alton looked away, but not before Jenny saw the raw need in his expression. He didn't want to lose them. Even though it was the smart choice. Even though it was the safe choice. He wanted to keep them close. Consequences be damned. "Then don't send us away," Jenny said. "Fight for us." "You don't know what you're asking." "Yes, I do. I'm asking you to choose us over your empire. Over your carefully balanced power structure. Over everything you've built." She stepped closer. "I'm asking you to be the man who reads board books to my daughter. Not the ghost of Chicago." That evening, Martinez Holdings, downtown Chicago. The conference room was silent as Alton faced his inner circle. Marcus stood to his right, loyal as always. But the other 5 men, capos who'd served him for over a decade, looked skeptical. Angry even. "You want to start a war with the Kozlovs over a woman?" Viktor Sokolov, his oldest lieutenant, asked. "A civilian." "Over a woman and child who are under my protection," Alton corrected. "Protection is one thing. Open declaration of personal involvement is another." Viktor leaned forward. "The moment you make this official, the moment you move them into your home, assign them a security detail, make it clear they matter to you, every enemy we have will target them. Is that what you want?" "What I want is irrelevant." "Then what are we discussing?" Alton looked at each man in turn. These were his soldiers. His brothers in all but blood. Men who'd killed for him, bled for him, built this empire alongside him. And he was about to ask them to risk everything for a waitress from Ohio and her baby daughter. 3 months ago, I made a promise to protect Jenny Hunter and her child, Alton said quietly. I could send them away. Hide them. Pretend they don't matter. But that's not what I'm going to do. What are you going to do? Marcus asked. I'm going to move them into the penthouse. I'm going to assign a permanent security detail. I'm going to make it crystal clear to the Kozlovs and anyone else watching that if they touch either of them, I will burn their entire organization to the ground. He paused. And yes, that means war. But I'm done pretending I can protect them from a distance. Victor stood abruptly. This is insanity. You're risking everything, our operations, our territories, our lives, for some woman you've known for 3 months. Yes. She must be incredible in bed. Alton moved so fast Victor didn't see it coming. One moment they were 10 feet apart. The next, Alton had him pinned against the wall by his throat. You will never, Alton said, his voice lethal, speak about her that way again. Are we clear? Victor's eyes widened. In 10 years, Alton had never lost control like this. Never let emotion override calculation. Clear, Victor choked out. Alton released him and stepped back, straightening his suit. Anyone else have concerns? Silence. Marcus finally spoke. What do you need from us? Everything. Full mobilization. I want the Kozlovs to understand that this isn't negotiable. Jenny and Lily are family now. And we protect family. Even if it costs us Detroit? Even if it costs us everything. The men exchanged glances. Some looked uncertain. Others looked resigned. But none of them left. Because that's what loyalty meant in Alton's world. You followed your leader even when he made choices that defied logic. Even when those choices might destroy everything you'd built together. Even when he chose love over power. When do we move them? Marcus asked. Tomorrow morning. I want a team at her apartment by dawn. Full tactical escort. And I want word sent to every organization from here to the East Coast. Jenny Hunter and Lily Hunter are under the personal protection of Alton Martinez. Anyone who touches them dies. No negotiations. No second chances. That's a declaration of war with at least 3 organizations. I know. Marcus studied him for a long moment. She must be something special. She is. And the kid. Alton thought about Lily's laugh. Her tiny hands patting his face. The way she'd fall asleep on his chest like she trusted him completely. She's everything, he said quietly. Victor, still rubbing his throat, shook his head. You've gone soft, Alton. 20 years building this empire, and you're going to risk it all for the first thing that's made me feel human in 2 decades, Alton interrupted. Yes. That's exactly what I'm doing. He looked around the room one final time. Anyone who wants out, leave now. No hard feelings. But if you stay, you're committing to this fight. All of it. No one moved. Good. Alton grabbed his coat. Meeting adjourned. We start tomorrow. As the men filed out, Marcus lingered. You know this changes everything, right? Once you make this move, there's no going back. You can't just be the ghost anymore. You'll be a man with something to lose. I know. And that makes you vulnerable. I know that too. Alton looked at his oldest friend. But for the first time in 20 years, I have something worth being vulnerable for. Marcus nodded slowly. Then we better make damn sure nothing happens to them. Nothing will. I'll burn this city to the ground first. And as Alton walked out into the Chicago night, he realized he meant it. Every word. He'd spent 2 decades building an empire on violence and fear, telling himself it was all to honor Sophia's memory, to protect the innocent, to keep his promise. But somewhere along the way, it had become about power for power's sake, about control, about being untouchable. Until a desperate woman texted the wrong number and reminded him what he was supposed to be fighting for. Not territory, not respect, not fear, but love, family, the chance to be something more than the sum of his sins, even if it cost him everything. Especially then. The Kozlovs made their move 3 days later. It was 11 p.m. when Alton's phone rang. Marcus, his voice tight with controlled fury. They hit the warehouse on Roosevelt. 4 of our men dead. They left a message. What message? Send us the woman and child, or we come for them ourselves. Alton stood in his penthouse, looking out at the Chicago skyline, and felt something old and terrible wake up inside him. The part of him he'd tried to bury since Jenny and Lily had entered his life. The part that had built an empire on calculated violence. Where are they now? We tracked them to an abandoned factory in Gary, Indiana. 15 men, heavily armed. They're waiting for your response. They'll get one. Alton grabbed his coat. Full tactical team. We leave in 20 minutes. Alton. Marcus hesitated. This is it. Once we do this, there's no political solution. The Bratva will retaliate. Other organizations will choose sides. We're looking at open war. I know. Is she worth it? Alton thought about Jenny's laugh. About Lily falling asleep on his chest. About Saturday mornings that felt like redemption. About feeling human for the first time in 20 years. Yes, he said. She is. The factory was exactly what Alton expected. Dark, isolated, perfect for an ambush. The Kozlovs weren't subtle. They wanted a confrontation. Wanted to prove that even the ghost of Chicago could be hurt if you found the right pressure point. They were about to learn why no one survived making that mistake. Alton's team moved like shadows. 30 men, professional as surgeons, armed with everything from silenced weapons to tactical gear that cost more than most people's houses. They surrounded the factory in a formation that left no escape routes. Marcus crouched beside Alton in the darkness. Thermal imaging shows 15 hostiles. 2nd floor. No civilians. No Jenny or Lily. This is just the threat team. Good. Alton checked his weapon. Remember, we send a message tonight. Make it clear. How clear? Clear enough that no one ever makes this mistake again. The breach was surgical. Silent entry through 3 points simultaneously. The Kozlovs never had time to sound an alarm. Alton found their leader, Dmitry Kozlov, nephew to the Bratva's boss, in what used to be the factory's main office. The man was young, maybe 30, with the arrogance of someone who'd inherited power without earning it. Martinez. Dmitri smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Come to negotiate? No. Alton stepped into the room, his weapon lowered but ready. Behind him, Marcus and 4 others covered the exits. I came to deliver a message. So did we. Your weakness is showing. The woman, the child, they make you soft. Human. Dmitri leaned back in his chair. My uncle thinks we can use that. Thinks maybe the great Alton Martinez will trade territory for their safety. Your uncle is wrong. Is he? Because I've been watching her. Pretty thing. And the baby so small. So fragile. Would be a shame if something happened. Alton moved. One moment he was standing 5 feet away. The next, Dmitri was on the ground, Alton's knee on his chest, gun pressed under his chin. Listen very carefully, Alton said, his voice cold as winter. I'm going to tell you exactly once. Jenny Hunter and Lily Hunter are off limits. Not because I'm weak. Because I'm giving you the chance to walk away before I show you exactly how ruthless I can be when someone threatens my family. Family? Dmitri laughed, choking on blood. You're a criminal. You don't get to have family. That's where you're wrong. Alton pressed the gun harder. Everyone gets to have family. Even monsters. The question is whether you're smart enough to respect that. And if we don't, then I dismantle your uncle's entire organization. Every warehouse, every operation, every lieutenant. I burn it all down until there's nothing left but ash and regret. And I start with you. Dmitri's arrogance finally cracked. He saw it then, the difference between inherited power and the kind of power Alton had built brick by bloody brick. The difference between playing at being dangerous and actually being the thing other monsters feared. Message received. Dmitri whispered. Good. Now you're going to go back to your uncle and tell him exactly what I said. Tell him that if anyone, even looks at Jenny or Lily wrong, I will consider it a declaration of war. And I will win that war. Are we clear? Clear. Alton stood, pulling Dmitri up with him. Marcus will escort you and your men to the border. You have 24 hours to clear out of Chicago. After that, any Kozlov found in my territory disappears. Permanently. He turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. If I ever hear your organization mention Jenny's or Lily's names again, if I even suspect you're watching them, I won't give you another warning. I'll just come for you. And you won't see me coming until it's too late. Dmitri nodded, all bravado gone. As Alton walked out of that factory, leaving the Kozlovs alive but broken, he felt something shift in his chest. He'd made his choice. Chosen Jenny and Lily over political safety. Over the careful balance he'd maintained for 2 decades. And it felt right. For the first time since Sophia died, doing the violent thing felt like it was in service of something worth protecting. 2 weeks later. The war Alton expected never came. Word spread through the underworld with the speed of wildfire. Alton Martinez had claimed a woman and child as family. He'd let the Kozlovs live to deliver that message. And the message was clear. This wasn't weakness. This was a line in the sand drawn by someone powerful enough to enforce it. 3 other organizations that had been considering challenges quietly backed off. The Kozlovs retreated to Detroit and stayed there. And slowly, impossibly, Alton's world stabilized around this new reality. He'd been right about one thing. Claiming Jenny and Lily publicly changed everything. But not in the way he'd feared. Instead of making him vulnerable, it made him more feared. Because everyone understood that a man with something to lose was a man with nothing left to restrain him. Jenny moved into the penthouse 2 weeks after the factory incident. She'd resisted at first. Didn't want to be a kept woman, didn't want Lily growing up in that world. But Alton had been patient. Explained that the threat was real. That protection required proximity. That he couldn't keep them safe from a distance anymore. And underneath all the practical reasons, the truth. I need you close. Both of you. Please. So she'd said yes. The first night in the penthouse, Jenny stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, holding Lily, looking out at the city that had become her strange new reality. Regrets? Alton asked, coming to stand beside her. Ask me in a year. Fair enough. Lily reached for him, and Alton took her automatically now, the gesture as natural as breathing. She nestled against his chest, her small hand finding his tie. She loves you, Jenny said softly. I love her too. The confession came easily now. No more pretending. No more distance. And me. Jenny turned to look at him, her expression open and vulnerable. Do you love me? Alton had spent 20 years building walls, keeping people at arm's length, refusing to let anyone close enough to hurt him. But looking at this woman, this brave, broken, beautiful woman who'd chosen to trust a monster, he felt those walls crumble completely. Yes, he said simply. God help me, yes. Jenny smiled, reached up to touch his face. Good. Because I love you too. Even though you're impossible and dangerous and completely wrong for me in every logical way. I am all of those things. I know. But you're also the man who saved my daughter. Who reads her board books. Who looks at her like she's the most precious thing in the world. She stepped closer. You're the man who chose us over your empire. I'd choose you over anything. I know. She kissed him then. Soft and sure and full of promise. That's why I'm staying. Behind them, the city glittered. Below them, Alton's empire continued turning, darker and more complicated than Jenny would ever fully understand. But up here, in this moment, none of that mattered. All that mattered was the three of them, together, choosing each other despite everything. 3 months later, 2:14 a.m. Jenny woke to her phone buzzing. For just a moment, one terrible, heart-stopping moment, she was back in that apartment in Ohio. Back in the nightmare. Back in the terror of an empty crib and a stolen daughter. Then she remembered, they were safe. They were home. Alton was just in the next room, working late like he always did. She checked her phone. A text message from Alton, even though he was 30 feet away. Can't sleep. Went to check on Lily. Come see. Jenny slipped out of bed and padded down the hallway to Lily's room. A space Alton had designed himself, with every safety measure imaginable and a luxury that still made Jenny's breath catch. She found him standing by the crib, just watching their daughter sleep. The dim nightlight cast shadows across his face, making him look older. Tired. Human. You okay? She whispered. I just needed to see her. He didn't look away from Lily. Some nights I still can't believe this is real. That I get to have this. Jenny wrapped her arms around him from behind. It's real. I don't deserve it. Neither do I. But we have it anyway. She rested her head against his back. That's what grace looks like, I think. Getting the things we don't deserve. They stood like that for a long moment, watching Lily sleep, holding each other in the darkness. Finally, Alton pulled out his phone and typed something. A moment later, Jenny's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen. You and your daughter are safe. Always. The same words he'd sent that first terrible night. But now they meant something different. Not a promise from a stranger in the darkness. A promise from family. From home. Always, Jenny whispered, reading the message. You promise. I promise. He turned to face her, cupping her face in his hands. I spent 20 years trying to keep a promise to my sister. Trying to protect children who couldn't protect themselves. But I was doing it all wrong. I was just surviving. Just going through the motions. And now I understand what Sophia really wanted. His voice was rough with emotion. She didn't want me to become a monster who protected strangers. She wanted me to find something worth living for. Someone to love. A family. You have that now. I know. He kissed her forehead. Thank you for giving me that. For trusting me. For staying when you should have run. Where else would I go? Jenny smiled. You're stuck with us, Martinez. Good. They stood in Lily's doorway, wrapped in each other, watching their daughter sleep. Outside, the city never stopped moving. Alton's empire, spinning on, darker and more complicated than any fairy tale. But here, in this moment, in this room, there was only peace. Hard-won. Earned through blood and choice and the impossible decision to love someone despite every logical reason not to. Jenny thought about that first night. About texting the wrong number in her darkest moment. About a stranger who'd become her salvation, her love, her family. About how sometimes the wrong number is exactly the right call. About how even monsters deserve second chances. About how grace looks like getting the things we don't deserve. "Come to bed," she whispered. "In a minute. I just want to watch her a little longer." Jenny understood. After everything they'd been through, after nearly losing Lily, after facing threats and choosing each other, sometimes you just needed to stand in the darkness and marvel at the miracle of ordinary safety. So she stayed with him, holding him while he held vigil over the child who'd saved them both. And when they finally went back to bed an hour later, Jenny fell asleep with Alton's arms around her and his promise echoing in her mind. "You and your daughter are safe. Always." In the morning, Lily would wake up laughing. They'd have breakfast together. Alton would leave for work, and Jenny would take Lily to daycare, and they'd live another ordinary day in their extraordinary life. But tonight, right now, all that mattered was this. They were together. They were safe. They were home. And sometimes that was miracle enough. Thanks for watching till the very end. If this story moved you, hit like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. I'll be dropping another unforgettable story tomorrow, so make sure you don't miss it.